Okay, let me know if you can hear me. And hello, Pat. Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. So, I did one of these last year and maybe a couple of years before that. Um, and let me pull up my slides on my end so I can grab text. Okay. So, in New Year's and new trends. I want to caveat, and well, I should start things off, of course. Um, you know, many of you, of course, know me. I host Nonprofit Commons, um, and as part of my um, sort of role and what I do at Nonprofit Commons, I like to kind of look out at technology and other things like that, and then kind of bring them back, and so we can have further discussions and maybe collectively learn and explore some of these things. So. Some of this is building very much upon some of the things that we saw as trends uh, last year, uh, because some of them are just such big trends, right? Um, so the first thing, of course, welcome to 2020, welcome to 2024. Um, and similar to last time, I've got kind of this similar disclosures or things that I put across. Um, any of the artwork graphics that are seen throughout the slides, um, there are a few things that are pulled from other sources, but all of the kind of art images are from Midjourney, and and so using both text and or image prompts. So just to know that, and then the resources, and I will put the link here in chat as well. Um, but there is a Pinterest board full of all kinds of goodies, um, including videos and diving much deeper than we can go through here in one NPC meeting. But there's lots of videos. There's lots of things too that dive in deep, especially um, a bunch of articles on like the kind of business and nonprofit side of things for various trends, and some of them go deeper into things like fundraising and organizational related stuff, including there's a couple good videos from even like TechSoup on AI powered tools. And so there's a lot more kind of if you dive deep into it, but consider this kind of like your bucket of resources to discover various things, technology and trends wise. Um, and not just technology, but like I said, as a fundraising and strategy and other stuff like that, social media kind of runs the gamut of those kind of things that are relevant to us, and some educational ones, of course, too, um, for 2024. So explore that Pinterest board. And let me go into back to slides for a sec. And of course, you can ask questions in chat or you can email me. So feel free to do either of those. And this is sort of a revision of last year's slide, right? And a lot of this year's slides were kind of like hyper focusing down. So it's not going to be a broad swath of like possible 2024 trends. Um, but it's so much, and I think as we've all seen in the past year, when we first were talking about, oh, this slide is kind of a very light revision on one of the slides from last year, and about AI and AI generated content. And I kind of kept it here and as a jumping off point because many of the things that we're going to talk about um, are uh, with what I'm focusing on today are going to be kind of driven by some of this AI related resurgence that we've seen in the last year. So, of course, to kind of to kind of re-go over some of this, AI machine learning obviously can automate tasks and analyze data and provide personalized services. And obviously, we're seeing more and more of those as we go along and as things evolve. And of course, it generates content by training through algorithms large data sets to learn that learn and then can be prompted to create 2D art, 3D art, audio, music, video, copy. That list is ever increasing. Um, Even we'll talk a bit more, even like bots and artificial, you know, uh, human related kind of avatars. So um, and of course, prominent examples of this are ChatGPT, DALL-E, Diffusion, Midjourney. There are so many other tools, and we'll kind of see an ecosystem of that in a second. And then I put a couple links in there. One is for Beth Cantor's kind of book on AI, although it's sort of uh, it takes it's a good one if especially on the nonprofit side of things, if you're looking for kind of a book that talks about kind of the overalls of AI possibilities and how, especially for those of us in the nonprofit educational social good space, could kind of factor in and look at AI and how it could be useful for optimizing what we do and not just making obsolete us. And then that's a prior OSCC workshop we did on art and AI. And on the next slide, I've also got um, a link that I'll share that is for stuff that Lear and myself and Sun Tzu did for a workshop. So this is a recent thing that came out. And I'll give you the link to specifically to this, but let me put the text in. It's a good kind of mapping, and by all means it has a lot of stuff in it, right? So this is focused on generative AI, and it's called the Gen AI Prism. It's a tool that was created by Brian Solis and a couple of designers. And it is it's a good breakdown of various AI tools and companies um, in this space that are kind of working on generative AI, and and breaking it down into how, like, in their framework, like how much is it revolve around, like you can kind of see and let me here's the link to the URL for the actual article that kind of goes into this. But you can see how they break out with both this sort of divided up pie chart, and here's, if you want to look at it really close, they have that article kind of goes through their how they break down the chart. And this is a Flickr image, which you can look at nice and beautiful and big, and zoom in and download if you wanted to use it for your own kind of exploration and looking at. And they kind of break it down between um, you know both like risk and reward, and then like things like, is this maybe is this solving something, is it augmenting something, is it creating something or automating um, or optimizing something. And then they break it down, that they keep breaking down the circle into sort of pie pieces then, that get into like where they fall, like are they sound related things or design tools or conversation stuff, text, video, workflow related stuff. Um, and you kind of sort of see how they break that down even further into, is it image, is it music? and then more largely into like, is this tool innovative? Is it, is it something iterative? Um, is it potentially an exponential tool that like it can really kind of change things? And then sort of the experimental. Um, and then that larger, most outer thing, like, is this a communication or a growth or a learning, related thing possibly. So either way, it's an interesting way to kind of look at, and again, not everything, but a good swath of like some of the ecosystem. The other thing that I wanted to um, explore with that as well is that in like towards the second half of last year, Lear and I did a presentation at um, VWEC, and we kind of did it on STEAM and education in regards to using generative and AI tools and things like that. And that also has a pretty extensive resource doc that kind of gets into all this, and it's always constantly updating. So the links for those two things are in there as well. Um, yes, and Sun Tzu was there too. And Sun Tzu's been very, obviously, the three of us have been working on this together. He just wasn't at the VWEC particular presentation. So, um, and then of course, I'm gonna get into some of. So I should just pop back just one. So with this generative AI tool set, and you know, besides the tools that are here, I also wanted to bring up that these things, like things are evolving very quickly. Um, and so even some of the tools are here, new ones will pop up. Many might die or get absorbed by others as things go along, and how they evolve over time is also amazing. So a good example of that is Midjourney. And this slide talks about how it just shows the evolution of Midjourney's model and the various versions it's gone through. And this is literally maybe within a year and a half or so. So things have evolved pretty quickly. Um, and in fact, Midjourney recently released their version 6. It's in alpha. Um, and you can explore that and by going into your settings, because right now where it's in alpha, it's not the default. Um, but you can explore that by going into settings and changing it to version 6. But you'll see here, and I've used this for some of the AI talks that we've done, the particular slide, just in this version, like how it goes from that first version and the prompt here is just typing in a dog at a computer, and how each version, and as I've tested it and gone back and tested some of the earlier ones too, what it's sort of bringing back as input. And this isn't inputting any particular style things or anything else. Um, and you can kind of see how each version has both improved and also changed. Like some people like the stylisticness of, like, say, version 3, or some of the earlier versions that might have a distinct almost style to them. But you can kind of see where, version 1 of Midjourney, that dog looks like something that is very crudely collaged. Um, version 2, okay, there's a sort of a dog face thing hovering over a keyboard, and then the other one is version 3 is sort of a stylistic version of almost that, where the dog is on the screen, like being, as if you're looking at the dog online. And then, version 4, you start to get, okay, we've got a dog, we've got a computer, and maybe it's still understanding things. Okay, there's two keyboards, there's, some weirdness over anatomy and some other things. Also you might get, multiple paws, or, things that are missing. Um, version 6, you're starting to get like, this is, looking like a more realistic dog. There's a couple of monitors. We've sort of lost the keyboard. Um, and then version 6, again, this is kind of new in the alpha. Um, you get a now, and again with that same exact prompt, just a dog at a computer, you get now that he's standing in a, he's sitting and he's got his hands on the keyboard and he's at a computer. He's got some things on his desk. There's only one keyboard. He's actually in a convincing room with depth of field happening. Um, and this might be a better close up of just even the detail of that, which, you know, considering when we started with, if you go back to looking at that version 1, um, and then what we're at right now, where that is absolutely a dog in an office space in somebody's house at a computer. Um, so and without any, again, any styling promptings. And I'm sure, you know, there's still there, you know, there's still a little weird quirks when you look at these things close up. So it's still, you know, if you would compare it to an actual photograph, though that's getting better, you know, but you might see little quirks here and there that kind of break that sense of it being truly a photograph of something. Or you know, a direct painted image, but still pretty remarkable for that like year and a half to 2 year time frame that you go from this evolution, you know, to this dog. Yep. Um, and so then that kind of leads us on. Uh, I wanted to bring up, you know, so that's one thing, that there's all these tools out there and they are constantly improving, right? And this Midjourney example is that same thing with ChatGPT. We're in ChatGPT 5 now. Um, and it's, you know, besides the fact of it's getting better persistence, it's getting being able to start to be trained if you're sort of keep continually interacting with it, that it can continue with that. Um, it's, you know, it still has issues, of course, with hallucinations, and Lyra can speak can speak to that, or share in chat how that's how it'll kind of suck up all kinds of information and maybe put them together in the wrong way, and especially when that is important, that is not something that you want to risk um, using for things that have to be accurate. As has been shown, don't use it to be your lawyer. Don't expect that you can accurately find information there enough that it's actually citable in an accurate way. So, you know, um, the another kind of tool, and actually in topic in general, and this is again, these are kind of all jumping from AI in a way, um, is personalized learning. Is a big kind of, I think, thing that's coming up in this horizon too. You know, we've seen uh, you know, some of this thought, and we've seen some of this focus on like how can we personalize learning. And I'm gonna make this so it's a link. Um, but now we're getting to a point that using AI, you can kind of truly start to do those things, right? And a good example of this, and there's a lot out there, and there's a lot, like a lot of learning tools, and there's a lot of ways of course, using generative AI in general, like things like using Copilot, which is Google's um, uh, coding related thing, or actually not Google, but uh, using that Copilot to like help you code and look for things like that. GitHub, I should say. So with personalized learning, we're seeing more and more the use of AI via intelligent agents and bots, and generative tools as a way to personalize learning to a student's needs. And again, this has, I think, always been a goal for many of us. Um, but a good example of that is new tools like Khan Academy's Khanmigo platform. And we brushed upon this a little bit last year, but how it uses AI and large language modeling to create a digital tutoring assistant. And that assistant is something that is persistent through that learner's journey. And so, and they've also, um, yes, it would. That would be really amazing. And there are like in that Pinterest board, there were a few great videos that I have from Sal Khan. But I agree, I would certainly I would love of Khan Academy to come present to us. Um, but it you know, they've also worked with, I mean, in essence, it's a customized version of OpenAI's Chat GPT, but they've worked with it and honed it so that way it it doesn't go beyond its boundaries of what it is supposed to be doing as an educational assistant. It does that in a way that, they've kind of worked on it, especially to be good at things that were initially hard because they don't fall within the same parameters of the strengths of a large language model, with like knowing math and other, computational in some ways, things like that that are not quite as um, naturally built into like the large language model stuff. They worked on kind of the concept of the hallucinating that we were talking about, in hopes to have it so that way it's not bringing up things that are beyond um, what it should be talking about. So it's not going to try to befriend in weird ways, or it's not going to bring up things that aren't true, that aren't. So it's like it's like ChatGPT working in conjunction with frameworks and guardrails to be able to get it to do what it needs to do, and also not while also not undermining that learner's journey. So um, it's not just simply like, oh, Conmigo, give me the answer to this, where it's actually bringing up like, well, if you've looked at this and you've done these things, have you looked back at that? Like it's much more guiding them to work on things in a way, and knowing what they have done in their past in their journey without actually just giving them the answers, right? So less of that as well. And it remembers the progress again of the learner to best guide them, through their journey. So, um, and at this point, that it is actually open now. Where when we first spoke about it, it was not open for people to be able to sign up for, and now they've sort of started it as a service. So it is. You can sign up, yourself or your children, or to Conmigo, and actually start getting tutoring. And again, it also allows, like, you can actually like plan on the educational side, like actually work with kind of like dovetailing with some lesson planning, and so, and I mean, it is it is geared to various things, of course, but it's much more focused on STEM topics. But it's an interesting, and I think some of the most positive things that uh, positive examples of what generative AI can be used for. There's a great video on that page that I just linked, where Sal Khan kind of gets into their vision for the future of learning and how that dovetails with what they're doing with Conmigo. And it's very inspiring. Um, so that's an example, I think, of another like future, another focus. Even though we've all been talking about personalized learning for a while, but a thing that is definitely is coming more to the forefront in reality. Um, and I should say, if folks have like questions or things that they want to talk about, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's much more, I think, focused on as a one-to-one sort of tutor for students. So I don't necessarily, and it's based off of topical things. So it's not necessarily the best scenario um, for learning prompt engineering. Um, but Uh, yeah, yeah. So maybe, though, and that should be another thing that what Gento brought up, that they have a job for prompt engineering. I think the concept of learning to become a pro, or for it behooves all of us, I think, to explore these tools. And in the case of like AI, one of the things that we all should be familiar with is like how they worked in regards to how best to prompt them. And each tool kind of has its own guidelines, and there are some kind of overarching things. And it's funny, I did not bring the slide in, but I almost did, from what Leah and I did at VWEC. But in the slides there, I have one on prompts and the difference between prompts, um, in regards to certain, types of things. And I certainly, in the link that I shared before with the slides and also the resource document that we've been compiling for the last year and a half or 2 years, that is a good place to look up some of there's distinctly some links to sites that, like, oh, you want tips for prompt engineering in regards to Midjourney or ChatGPT or those sort of things, and look back at the slides that we did, as well, um, because there's actually lots of great things. And let me bring in the doc again. This is the notes directly. I'll bring in the resource doc again. If you scroll down, there's a great kind of thing about natural language processing. Um, and there's a slide there about prompt engineering that kind of talks about the differences between transformers and diffusion models, like basically the different ways certain model types work, where some are looking for you to kind of input things on you know, give me the who, what, when, where of things, and especially chat related ones where you're prompting it as if it is a kind of a news article. And then, the diffusion models, like the generative art ones, you're dealing with them as if they're, um, more like citations for an image, right? Because a lot of them are based off of looking at images, and how they are cataloged. And so, okay, what style is this? Like, what mediums, like, those sort of things. So, and how the differences in prompting those two things, um, uh, work. Um, and yeah. Uh, and I will, so you'll see those in the slide, and I will, I'll see if I can, and then the links to the slides too are there too. But um, you, that's a good one to look back on for regards to that. And then yes, there are detecting apps. We've brought up a couple. There are some in the resource doc too, in the larger resource doc. So I would look back at that too as well. Um, so kind of moving on from personal learning, and this is sort of in some ways a that example of Khan, and personalized learning itself is a perk and a plus, certainly for the development of or for the use of generative AI. Um, then we get into things, digital literacy, right? Obviously, and Val has had many presentations on digital literacy and also online security. They very much dovetail together in a lot of ways. Um, so and let me grab the text for this. Um, with the use of digital and social media tools, and this of course starts when we this started even when we were talking about Web 2.0, right? So um, digital literacy has been relevant for decades now. But as these tools progress, and specifically AI tools, the concept of what literacy, like the literacy skills needed, gets even more complex as well. So with the use of these digital social media tools, and now with the rise of generative AI, there's absolutely a need that everyone should have a good foundation in digital literacy and online security. Um, yeah, yeah, that would be fantastic, Val. I think, that how I always think, Val's bringing up the whole mental health in regards to piece of it. So besides digital literacy and security, that there's also this mental health related thing, and that kind of gets into the cyberbullying and all that sort of stuff, and the anxieties of things, in regards to technologies. Um, and that would be a fantastic topic to dive deeper into for sure. I always think about, many of us here are, like, of an age that, like, we have seen the evolution of these things. But if you think back to, like, our youth, like, we lived in worlds where maybe people can take photos of things, but outside of somebody bringing a photo to school, like, you didn't have to worry about what people are posting online or sharing or creating, and that gets into the sort of second, paragraph of this slide, that generative AI tools, besides from just sharing, right? Like we've been dealing with user generated content for a long while now, right? But now we have AI tools that can create reality in a way that doesn't exist. Or so they can create convincing images and audio and video that can mislead people, um, and 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 make it complicated to know, is this real or is this fake? Is this truth or is this misinformation? Um, oh, that's interesting. Like Val's bringing up character AI, that allows characters that you and others create. So yeah, I've seen stuff like that, but that also has, goods and bads. That can be great if you wanted to, on a bot sense or a conversational AI sense, recreate a literary character that people could talk to. But you could obviously just as easily create something that would be um, uh, negative as well. And Savarna's bringing up deep fakes, and that definitely speaks to this too. Those will get only more and more convincing. I, uh, there's also bringing up, and I don't necessarily know if you guys are aware of this, but like there's this whole AI influencers, right? So there's folks who have even created AI personas and have Instagram or other related social media things and push them out. I mean, they're kind of a branding thing, but they also can be very misleading too, sort of as if, you think about the hyper realism that you can get generative images or, and even like sort of deep fakes and what we're talking about to be, that actually can create a non-living person persona and have that interact with folks throughout the internet. Um, and also generative voice scams, right? Um, it takes, even a few seconds of audio can create a kind of a voice, right? Um, and there are tools that even can do very low latency, quick text to voice, and would allow, and this is already sort of happening with, like, phone voice scams, right? So somebody can call an elderly person and say that they're a relative and that they're in need of help. There's lots of things that are already happening like that. And of course, as we talk about deep fakes, misleading videos are already happening as well. um, and I think a lot of platforms and tools are working on ways to verify content, and human versus AI. And I think in the case of that sort of social influencer example, like probably more you know more ways that to verify, is this person human versus an AI. So this social account, a generative, AI, or is it an actual person? And I think, we've often had for a while, like, oh, is this account a bot or not? But now we're talking about more sophisticated, like, you know, um, a more sophisticated front facing version of that gets harder to sort of suss out in that way. There's a good video that is also in that Pinterest board. And don't watch it now because it's about like maybe I think 8 or 9 minutes long, but where it gets really into a lot of future, potential future tools in the AI sphere. Um, Yeah, 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 and I agree, Gentle. But so that video gets into various tools. Some of them they bring up more in depth the whole idea of AI influencers, and that instant, sort of almost instantaneous, like type something in, and then like couple seconds later, it's speaking it, so you could actually like live type or copy paste and script things or scammer could to do those kind of things. Um and I'm not putting these things out to scare, but the idea that like this really ups the ante in regards to how important digital literacy education and training and skill building across the board is. um and Gentle's point, just to read it out, like, she's said if anything is valuable, the tech will exist or be created to fake it. So all the faking of information shows exactly how valuable that information is. Um, you know, and I'd also like to like add to that too, Gentle. I think that also, comes to the comes to the thing that's been evolving from sort of from that Web 2.0 social media, user generated content initial things to now that like, ultimately our attentions on these platforms, are kind of the marketable things. So all these things, even on lesser forms that aren't so nefarious, are also using these tools to, or can use these tools to kind of keep us glued or influence or those kind of things. So, and again, that kind of goes back um, to the importance of digital literacy. So, yes, yeah, and I mean, and I think Savarna's saying that individual posts authoring AI generated books on Amazon as experts, and that Amazon is closely monitoring the books being offered. I think that's distinctly, I think that we're seeing that too in regards to in the with kind of art, and also there's lots of pushback and being able to do that because obviously you cannot the Copyright Office is not allowing AI generated works to be copyrighted, right? So um, that to getting into books and art and those kind of things, at least at this point. So there has to be, uh, I don't know if anybody else has. I'm scrolling up to see if I missed anything. Y- Yes, yes, yeah. A lot of Marley was bringing up the whole. We have a lot of practice dealing with fake news all the time, and then thinking about the word meanings have been reversed. Yes, I mean that gets into kind of like Marley's bringing up that whole that even the semiotics of words themselves have evolved to kind of like how how people have used language against itself. And I think now we're talking about also adding in um, adding in the ability that you can also create convincing videos and an instantaneous audio of something fake, right? And what Sarvana brought up, the deep fake. That video that I shared just recently, again, I would definitely look at that. And it brings up even how AI is being used in warfare, how AI is being used in robotics, how AI is being used in with the stuff that we're talking about with like online related you know voice and video, and how you could just take a photo and from that photo be able to animate that and then be able to make a video of that animation as if that person is doing that thing, back to deep fakes. So and again, all these things are also amazing creative tools, right? The good side of it, that it lowers the barrier and democratizes content, create content and creation and creativity. So if used for good things, right, you could have ideas, and this is like you see this instantaneously about Midjourney on a simple way, right? Or in video, in that it would allow people who maybe don't have the technical or creative skills to be able to envision things that they might not have before. Um, and I mean, it's still, and I know this, and in that AI initial AI resource doc that put together, that has all these sort of things to read, that there is some of that debate over where you fall in that creativity and future of art, and how AI influences that. Um, but I think at its best, AI hopefully will be a tool to supplement and not usurp. But um, yeah, yeah, I think Marley, that whole phone addiction has been happening for a long time, and now to that point of like an artificial and like AI driven agents, that really ups that, like, people don't even necessarily even have to be talking to actual people. It can be like can be kind of focused on even like diving into knowing artificial AI bots, and that can like kind of hold them too. So um And then Gartner, which some of you might know for their well, Gartner, and then also this is by Hootsuite, but Hootsuite used some Gartner data too. Hootsuite is a social platform that allows people to share. Um, um, well, it has various social media, both sharing tools and they put together a survey, and then they put out there's a report even, and there's their trends, their social media trends for 2024. um, and some of the most interesting things, and and if that's the link that I just put in for it. If you scroll down, then they have many trends for the year, right? And the first one that they bring up, of course, is AI. And there are some interesting data in regards to some of the survey questions, right? So, and let me grab the information from this my slide first so I can put that copy in here. Um, and the Yep. Uh, yep. And there's this. So, uh, and of course, going back to that, like generative AI, we'd like to think, and that it can be, of course, a source for hope for busy professionals, and many is working in that. And then, but of course, it has risks. And this particular question was very interesting. I mean, there was a prior question in the that they uh, brought up in the survey that says 62 that came up with the results that 62% of consumers say they are less likely to engage with and trust content if they know it was created by an AI application. Um, so there's certainly, of course, this bias. We're still not, and as we're all talking about um, in regards to um, in regards to this some of the possible negatives we've just been talking about fuels, I think, something like that percentage. And then if you look at the other questions that are listed on this slide, um, so thinking about social content generated by AI, they asked, rate your agreement with the following statements. And they have it here, and I'll just narrate it a little bit. So they have, if I know something is created by an AI application, I am less likely to engage with it. And you can kind of see, and they break it down by age groups: Generation Z, Millennials, Generation X, and Baby Boomers. And that's what those color bars are in order of age from youngest to oldest at the bottom. And so you can see that based off of things, not in all cases, but in most cases, at least the first couple questions, that there is more mistrust, of course, as people are older. Um, uh, well, actually, not more, actually, the other way around. Sorry. Yeah, there's more mistrust. Sorry, as they get older. So you could see that, like, that just in this question alone, like, a higher percentage of baby boomers have mistrust. But then you have, like, Gen Z, that there's much more acceptance of that. So this also gives you that idea, like, back to that digital literacy, like, how do you kind of, you know, is that lesser number because they're more digital literate, or is it just because, like, it's just part of their world and they're just absorbing it all anyway? And how then, if that's the case, do you improve or hone that digital literacy to make sure that, you know, they may not be natural distrust or thinking beyond something, and how can digital literacy kind of help that too? Yes, yeah. And then, that second question, if I know something is written by an AI application, I'm less likely to trust it. And you see the same kind of pattern. And then um, you've got it's hard to tell what images are real or fake using AI. And I think right now it's still fairly low across the board, like about 20% or less for all think that they kind of know. Like, that most, so the majority think that they know what a real or a fake created image is. But that's going to, as we were seeing, as the sophistication of image generations and other media content increase, that's going to get harder to kind of clarify, you know. Um, And then that other one too, it's hard to get what information is real or fake. And again, it's still a small percentage. So, uh, but we're still kind of early days where AI generated content in general will kind of get more sophisticated. So, um, and then I'm looking at back at what people are saying. Um, and yes, Sarvana was talking about that as a company. You know, generative AI is a time saving office and research assistant for me. Like, I absolutely, I think uh, there's many positive use cases of it. And then, we have where is it? The Val, of course, most content is now born digital, and most literacy is now digital literacy. Literacy used to mean reading and writing with paper and pencil, and she kind of laughed about that. Um, and then Child was asking, would be interesting to know how people are interpreting the results, as you're saying, right? The distrust could be from wisdom about the risk or distrust of the new. And I think that, um, they do have the full report, and there may be deeper dive into that about their analysis. You can, I imagine you would have to probably give them an email address to download the full report, but even just the page that I linked to has a lot more information. Um, and and then I'm looking. Uh, and by the way, Nemo, you have your mic open. Um, and Yep, folks talking about that. Ava's talking about the back to AI buddy, the problematic probability that people will tend to prefer a buddy who has no human complexity issues or needs of their own. The support, yes. Um, I mean, I still do think Conmigo is a fantastic idea, and I think that it's you. I think you have to think about always a lot of these tools is in conjunction with humans too. Is really the ideal, right? That you're working alongside with AI, and it's not just AI from on high. Um, and then yes, AI ethics, of course. Um, oh, that's interesting. The AI impacts of relationships. Yes, that's what we're talking about. But I think Val would be fantastic to have her come in and talk. Um, and then, okay, yes. And then Sheila is talking about other literacies are also important, engaging with information in your everyday environment, face to face with people, reading your physical environment can help for the literacy and what reality is. Yes, but I do think we are kind of coming into this space of like people really needing critical skills in order to be able to um, determine more hopefully more accurately like when is something that whole real or fake or truth or misinformation. um, oh, that's great too on humane tech. Yes, Val sharing that. And I don't know if folks have other conversations, but I have a couple more slides um, that sort of, though are still, I figured we'd kind of end a little bit off the AI piece since it's so intense and it's so deep too at this point, right? That and get us thinking a little bit more towards where we are in regards to, and this is in essence a slide taken from last year, right? But that is still uh, still all, we talked about some of it that still kind of jumps from some of the prior concepts in regards to 2D spaces and now more in Web 3.0 and this immersive overarching term for the next phase of the internet, right? And that again, hoping for it to be more open, decentralized, immersive. Um, and then that bit of that, the concept of an metaverse and immersive evolution of the internet will continue to increase. And it's funny, some of the in that Pinterest board that I put together, there's even some of the nonprofit focused ones that are harkening back to that are still talking about the metaverse. Um, it's sort of had its up, like all sort of, I think, things of waves or whatever. The AI wave has sort of dampened a bit people talking about the metaverse as much, though obviously it's still happening. There's things still evolution of both tools and spaces. Um, and there were quite a few articles that were bringing that up in regards to um, both how to reach out to audiences and engage, and also creating experiences, fundraising in these spaces that almost harken back to a lot of the things that we've been doing here in virtual worlds like Second Life for a long time. But it's sort of going back into the stream of nonprofits talking about how to use the metaverse in these ways, which is so look for some of those in regards to those Pinterest articles. Um, and of course, for many of us, and this is like that little point that we're meeting here in a what in essence is a piece of the metaverse, in a virtual space, and that we're using these tools, not just here, but throughout all the work that we're kind of doing. And I think keeping this question in mind, like how can we continue to shine a light on the work we do in these spaces? And I think that we definitely will see, we know that Meta put out their, Quest 3 headset, and that's sort of gotten more positive reviews because it is adopting more pass through and ability to be able to kind of see some of the surroundings around you. And I kind of want to end that with this slide, or, as the last one is that, you know, this kind of conversation about AR and VR, or I don't know how many of you have ever heard the term phygital, but that's kind of another term that's being bandied about in regards to that physical digital kind of hybrid. Um, and uh, but these sort of spaces, and that kind of dovetails with the concept of spatial computing, especially. And this year Apple is going to, and I don't know if how many of you might have seen them talk about this when they did their kind of launch event late in the second half of last year, but they'll be releasing Apple's Vision Pro headset. And now, of course, it's out of the price point of many of us, right? So but the fact that it's not focused only on just VR, that it really has a strong kind of pass through, even more so than what Quest has with their updated headset. But this concept of augmenting the world around you and rethinking computer interfaces in general. If you watch the demo event that Apple gave, they never once said, like, the metaverse or virtual or even VR, or like they really pushed it where they're looking at this like, how does this become the next mouse, the next iPhone, the next, you know what I mean? So rethinking it as a computer interface, and the idea of spatially working in these immersive technologies, right? So not just game related things, but like with your apps and with the world around you, and being able to take videos and immersively play them back as if you're capturing a memory and replaying that. Um, and again, this headset is like will be like what, $3,500 or more. So that cost is at this particular moment out of the reach of most folks, but it's something to look at in this coming year, because it's really going to push the ecosystem forward, and especially for people to think beyond just the headset, um, on how these tools can kind of change how we interact with things and be more plugged into like that 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 phygital hybrid mixed reality spatial computing within kind of mix. um, so you can obviously look at Apple's site and kind of see what they're talking about it. You go back to, like, if you watch like the little video keynote from that piece, it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty interesting that they never mention VR. Like, it's not just about that for them. And there's many more tools that I'm sure will come in the wake of this, or this will spur similar in the way that, like, the iPod and the iPhone and all these other things have too. So definitely something to look at, and think about as we kind of go through this year, um, and see how this evolves things. And I think, again, back to that prior slide, like thinking about that, like how can we continue to shine a light on what we do here, especially in relation to how many of the things that we have done in virtual worlds and in mixed reality events or those kind of things, transcend to these newer interfaces as well. Um, Yes, yes. He's been an avid advisor in Midjourney, yes. Um, and yeah. So if anybody, and I think, did Sheila, somebody had a question. If folks have a, it's harder to kind of speak in sometimes and answer questions live. But if, by all means, like, keep chatting in this. This is all just kind of food for thought in a way. I mean, AI is going to be very, I think, is going to be ever present going forward. I mean, I think some of the, it is not I think, a catch-all solution for everything. And so some of that hype will kind of probably fade a bit. But, Pandora's box has been opened that we're not going backwards. So, um, yeah. So, and I would, and I would say, yes, Val, to like, any topics or things, what you brought up with your daughter's research, or any others that have topics or things that like we think are relevant and jump from these things, I think to be as relevant and and I think if you dive into any of these tools and you want to talk about them in the year or, and I mean, I plan on doing similarly as well. Um, and, yeah, yeah, and I think there's a lot of, in the same way that people have used, to Nemo Pal's, comment, like I think it's the same way that people have used virtual spaces for therapeutic reasons, right? Like here in Second Life and other VR or virtual worlds. I think that concept of what the Vision Pro could do in some ways could be helpful for those sort of things. Yeah, thank you. That, of course, is also an AI generated version. I should redo this with the Midjourney's version 6 to see if what it comes up with. But this particular one uses both an actual photo prompt of myself and, with text prompts with it. So it's jumping from a photo as well, in and kind of working with that as one of its inputs. So, um, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I hope this, I hope this is kind of an interesting food for thought for the year, and we'll see what comes of all this stuff, right? There's going to be ebbs and flows just like there is, but I think we all have advantage that we're all pretty, you know, even if we're not tech, like, there's probably very few of us who are programmers or have those kind of skills. But even with that, there's still fantastic ways to explore these tools, going back to something, um, like where is it? The matrix of the oops, this one. Yeah, going back to this matrix. I mean, you know, start exploring some of those tools. And again, I would say, see which ones you might be worth kind of diving into to explore, and maybe helpful for your work, maybe helpful for creative things. And that's the Pinterest board again. Um, so, uh, and with that, like, I think I should wrap. And, by all means, if you have questions or chats, you can still continue chatting. I really look forward to 2024, and I encourage you all to, you know, to present, whether on anything we talked about here, or even on all the work that you're doing, or tours or events that you might be having. Um, but yeah, it should be exciting, and I think most of us are willing to play and explore. So, um, you know, as these things come up, we can kind of do that and learn together. So that's how I see all of this. So thank you again, all of you, and, I will kind of wrap and kind of come off voice, but, thank you for, and fantastic as always to see you in a new year. So I should say too, I have the slides on Canva. If anybody wants me to share it with them, just let me know. Just IM me.